Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Wise Words. I'm trying something different today. I did a little slideshow, which I'm just still filming on my camera looking at my computer, but eventually I will, as I learn more technology-wise, I will be able to do this on a format where my face is on it too and all those different kinds of things. But for today, hopefully the images aren't too difficult with the glare on the screen, but I wanted to share a few different images today, so let's dive right in. Today's topic is Captain Von Trapp's wise words on losing your world. And Christopher Plummer, a really great Shakespearean actor, Canadian, he passed away here in the month of February, and I wanted to take a little moment to reflect on this in particular. He, of course, had many roles and was sometimes dogged a bit by his role of Captain Von Trapp because it was by far the role he was most well known for. And he sometimes regretted that, but of course in later life said, the blessings of the success of Sound of Music and the Von Trapp family story was something that, he was very grateful to be a part of, even though sometimes he felt the following limited him. So in any case, the wise words I want to capture today on today's topic actually occur quite a ways down in the story. So I'm not going to share those with you off the top, but rather take you through a bit of a narration, which we will then get to, the point I want to talk about. And I'm actually going to end the video talking also a little bit about a moment in the TV series Downton Abbey that I think also very much reflects this. So let's just dive right in. A few quick disclaimers. Number one, all images, references, and quotes are used under the fair use guidelines according to the regulation. Two, I'm learning more and more as I do these videos. Apparently, I have to say everything in this video is my own thoughts and opinions, because apparently people share other people's thoughts and opinions and claim them to be their own. So here we go. Yes, these are all my own thoughts and opinions. And also, again, I mentioned technically I'm still figuring out how to do all this, and I'm still using my phone. So if you're looking for a perfect presentation, you'll need to change the channel because we're still learning here. Okay, so this image, and for those of you who are familiar with the Sound of Music, this image is from about 20 minutes into the film. The Captain Von Trapp has just returned from Vienna with his girlfriend, a Baroness von Schrader, and they're in the backyard of his house waiting for him to introduce her to his children. And a young dispatcher, a young courier comes, and he has a telegram. And in kind of a awkward moment, the courier is nervous, and he puts up his hand and says, "Hail Hitler," which of course Captain Von Trapp responds to in a visceral way. And then it leads into this entire scene. So I'm just going to go ahead and click onto the next image and show you what I mean here. So now, to set the stage, Von Trapp is a decorated naval captain in the Imperial Navy, which would have been, the Hungarian Empire at the time, with Austria, and a very successful, illustrious career. But more importantly, a military man, a worldly man, a man who knew the truth about evil, knew the truth about the powers that were brewing in Europe at the time. Basically, in terms of everybody in his immediate surroundings, was the person who understood what was going on, and knew the imminent threat that was coming, that was probably absolutely inevitable, and he knew that at this point. So he tells this young boy, "Okay, you've delivered your telegram, get out of here." And this conversation pursues after, and this is his brother-in-law Max and his girlfriend. And Max, who's quite an opportunist, basically says what's going to happen is going to happen as long as it doesn't happen to you. Being fully comfortable with no matter what evil may or may not be in power, Max is quite confident that he will be able to work it to his benefit. you know. And the Baroness, she has a little different perspective. She's a little more worried. You can see it on her face. She knows her position is probably a little more precarious in all this. And she knows that, it could these changes could very much change everyone's way of life, not just hers. So to this statement of Max, this flippant, ridiculous comment, Von Trapp turns to his brother-in-law and says, Max, don't you ever say that. And Max says, well, I'm not political. Can I help it if other people are? And he says, you have to, you have to care. And so then we go back to the first scene. Max leaves, and then it's just the two of them leaning against the fence, and he's very quiet. And she says, you're very far away. Where are you? And Captain Von Trapp says, I'm in a world that's disappearing. Which is a very sad statement, but is definitely what the case was at that time. So this next image is, they have a ball there immediately, shortly thereafter, and in attendance in the ball is an Austrian by the name of Herr Zeller, who is very pro-Hitler, very pro-Third Reich. And he's quite excited at the thought of Austria becoming a part of this military machine and this very evil empire, right? Or this evil group aspiring to become an empire. And so he challenges Von Trapp, because he knows Von Trapp is not in support of this at all, that he believes in a true, free, independent Austria. And of course, we've just gone through this period where there's been singing and Herr Zeller challenges him, and he says, an ostrich buries his head in the sand, and sometimes in the flag, because of course he has a big Austrian flag hanging on the wall, and he said, if the Nazis take over Austria, maybe they'd be better off to put their words in song. He kind of, jibes at Von Trapp. And Von Trapp replies, he says, well, I have no doubt if they take over Austria, you will be the entire trumpet section. To which this Nazi sympathizer says, you flatter me. And of course, Von Trapp right away turns around. He says, oh, how clumsy of me. I meant to accuse you. So very much, again, surrounded by people who either don't understand or seek to benefit or profit from the evil that is coming, and he's very alone. And when I watched this again recently, because we all grew up with The Sound of Music, and we watched it at Christmas, and we love the kids singing, and it's a wonderful love story. But from a political point of view, as a person who studied a lot about World War II, and I've been to Germany and Auschwitz and a lot of these places, it was a very lonely. He's a very lonely and individual character. Like, he's surrounded by people. He's surrounded by his children, and he halfway through the film marries a very loving wife who does understand him and his character, but he very much is on his own, or positioned on his own in this film. And I wanted to raise this because I think there's lots going on in the world right now, and some people feel very alone in their perspectives of what's going on in the world and the extent to which what we know is changing and is disappearing. So anyways, let's continue on along, and we'll get closer to so he and his wife Maria, they return from their honeymoon. He comes home, and there has been a Nazi flag hung over his door, which he pulls down and tears in half. And is, as you can see, quite angry that it's there and disgusted that this happened. And he then questions his brother-in-law um, as to, let's see if this takes me back. No, just wait. So he questions his brother-in-law at that time, and his brother-in-law Max says, well, I had nothing to do with that flag being there. That has nothing to do with me. And Max right away starts saying how, now that you're back, I signed up the kids to sing in this festival. And right away, Von Trapp says, no, I already told you my kids aren't singing in public. And Max replies to him, but it's important. This is for Austria. To which he turns around, because now the Nazis occupy Austria. Von Trapp turns around. He says, there is no more Austria. And to which Max replies, well, at least the takeover happened peacefully. We should be grateful for that. And Von Trapp just loses it. He says, grateful? He says, sometimes, Max, I don't believe I know you. So anyways, as this happens, then they continue on. As soon as they arrive back, there is a telegram for him demanding that he, the Germans are basically conscripting him because he's extremely good at what he does. He's a very good naval captain. They said, you need to come. You're going to work for us. You need to report within 24 hours. And he says to Maria, he says, if I refuse, it's fatal for all of us. They'll kill us all. And yet I can't do this. To join him is unthinkable. So he said, pack up the kids because we're leaving Austria today. And we're leaving everything we have behind. So then we get to, of course, anyone who's seen the show knows they meet them at the gate and they can't get away. So they have to go through this big ruse of performing at this festival. So Max gets what he wants after all. Well, to some extent. So they go to this festival and they sing, and he sings Edelweiss, which now we all think of as an Austrian film, but it was actually a song written by Rodgers and Hammerstein. It has nothing to do with Austria, but Austria has actually claimed it because of the very popular nature of this show. But it never was an Austrian folk song, as it was kind of spoken of in the film. But prior to singing this song in front of what is a huge crowd of Austrian nationals, Von Trapp gets up, and these are the wise words. He says, my fellow Austrians, I would like to sing for you now a love song. I know you share this love, and I pray you will never let it die. So in this moment, he's saying goodbye to his country, his friends, because although no one in the crowd knows, they believe he's going away to fight for the Nazis, that he's been conscripted. But he's the one who knows, no, he's leaving, and the world he knows is never going to be the same, and he will never be back. And so this poignant moment is the moment of the film, or one of the key moments of the film. So in any case, what I wanted to talk about here is what I feel has been happening for many people in the last little while. And I think part of it is because of the flu and we're coming on, this week will be a year since we really started to see lockdowns and shutdowns in the world. And we often hear bandied about this, which this is, I don't know even how to describe this term. It's humorous, ironical. Anyways, but one of the terms that's being bandied about is the new normal in the world. And some people are, oh yeah, I'm going to work from home more, and this is good, and that's okay, and there's nothing wrong with this, and it's going to be all right. And yeah, it may be all of those things. But that doesn't change the fact that what we will no longer have, we will no longer have. And a lot of people are grieving things that are going to be different and things that are going to disappear or change. And I want to just take some moments in this video and in today's presentation, and maybe it has a little bit to do with the fact that we're in Lent, and of course when I'm in Lent I deal a lot with issues of grief and issues of preparation for change and preparation for difficulty, and so this is very much the tone of this video. But like all things in Lent, there's always hope at the end. So there will be hope in this message at the end. But in this case, we are in a world right now where people are seeing things change in a very permanent way. And I think it's important that we make an effort to recognize that things are changing for people, and to give the proper respect and acknowledgement to that, and to those who are feeling this and experiencing this. Because the whitewash Pollyanna, everything's going to be just fine, is not necessarily going to be the case. There will be cases where things will be different and not in a good way. Now, I'm not suggesting we should despair. I'm not suggesting that is, what we want to do. But I think an important part of living a healthy life is grieving when it's appropriate to grieve and not putting that off. So before we get too far down, kind of into my closing thoughts, I want to bring up this one other example. For those of you who, most people know this, but I've written 3 books on lessons and learnings from the TV series Downton Abbey. The first 2, leadership lessons in change management, I co-wrote with my sister and old business partner Jeannie Martinson, and I single wrote the relationship lessons from Downton Abbey myself, based on a lot of my codependency, relationship, family systems, counseling experience. So I'm going to use also a Downton Abbey example here that I think ties in really, really well. So for those of you who are not familiar with Downton Abbey, Tom Branson, who's pictured here, he's an Irish revolutionary. He's an Irish socialist who comes to work in this house, and this is right at the time of the Russian Revolution. And he, in his heart, wants to see a free Ireland, and he's for the people's, what is still at this point being called the People's Revolution in Russia. And he's down in the servants' hall, and one of the servants bring up the idea that, or something from the paper that says they've imprisoned the Tsar and his children. To which this idealistic and naive young revolutionary, young socialist says, well, nothing's going to happen to him. No one wants to start a new political era with the murder of a bunch of young girls. To which point, a couple of the older, more mature people at the table kind of gave him a look and an eyebrow like, we'll see kind of thing. So anyway, sure enough, as we continue into the story, the Tsar is killed and all his children are killed. And Tom Branson, comes to the statement that says, I'm sorry, I don't deny it. Like he's coming to terms with the truth of what's going on versus just what he's bought into, what he's believed, what his idealism and the people preaching that idealism have promised him. And later in this show, he wants to participate in Ireland's freedom, and he goes back to Ireland with his wife, who is an English woman, and he ends up participating in what is a quite shocking and destructive and dangerous situation of, I guess now what we would call domestic terrorism. The group of revolutionaries he's a part of plan the they basically burned down a house, and some people almost die. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of lost life, but he's at this scene, and it hits home. It actually hits home, and he experiences, what's going on there, and it kind of starts to help him realize that he was naive to believe that evil and corruption only exists on the opposite side of your political view, that only your opponents are capable of evil and corruption and not the people you vote for. So he comes to terms with this a little bit in this show as to what is truly possible. And, as a follower of Christ, we learn very, very early on how easily the human heart is corrupted and how everyone has the potential of the worst in them, and how we work against the flesh and we work against the things that would draw us into evil. We struggle against that in life because it's very, very easy for the heart to be corrupted and to be turned. So he's coming to terms with that in Downton Abbey in this situation. And then the next thing that happens here that I want to raise is some Russian exiles. So after the revolution happens, there are some Russian exiles, some people who were in the aristocracy, who flee to England, and Lady Grantham, one of the characters, knew them from 60 years ago, and this woman in the center with the looking face forward, her name is Princess Karagan. Her first name is Irina. And when the revolution happened, she was exiled by the Soviets to China, where she worked as a nurse for 5 years. And her husband, who is on the far right, his back is to us, didn't know if she was dead or alive. She didn't know if he was dead or alive. The Dowager Countess Grantham was able to find her through the British Foreign Office and rescue her and bring her back and reunite her with her husband. And Isabel, who's the woman on the left and her back is slightly turned, she too is a very naive, optimist, liberal in the situation. Early on, when they're looking for the princess, she says to Igor on the right, she says, well, what about the Foreign Office in the Soviet Union? Won't they help you? And he's like, are you kidding me? They threw us out. They exiled her. You think they're going to tell me where to find her? Like, this idea that the people heading up the revolution were somehow kinder and nicer and more benevolent than the people they overthrew. This naivety of how we like to see our own side in politics as being, benevolent and the other side is evil, when in fact, corruption exists everywhere. So in any case, I wanted to show this scene because this is one of the most powerful scenes, I think, in historical fiction on television. And Isabel, again, the woman with her back slightly to us on the left, says to the princess, who's looking straight at her, she says, I have always wanted to go to Russia, but I'm sad I've never been. To which the princess looks at her and says, well, you've missed it. So, the reality that, unlike Austria and The Sound of Music, where, the Allies prevailed and the Third Reich was put down and Austria was restored. It was never restored for the von Trapp family. They had to flee to America, and Captain von Trapp died 5 years after arriving there. So what he left forever. It was never restored to him. But in the case of this woman, in the case of the Russian Revolution, in the case of, the communist regime occupying Russia for more than 60 years, killing 60 million people, these people never got anything back. And unfortunately, the uh, the people who stayed behind, who were promised this great life, promised that if we steal everything from the rich and distribute it amongst the people, that we'll all live a better life. Those were the 60 million that succumbed to, you know, starvation and work camps and all of those different things. So, the tragedy on this woman's face right here, you know, the poignancy of her comment, well, you've missed it, was very, very true in the case of Russia. Because even if Russia were to return to full freedom, which, I mean, it made a great headway when the Soviet Union broke apart, but it will never get back what it lost. It will never get back its culture. It will never get back the beauty and the creativity, because as much as people from those kind of regimes praise their great abilities to excel, creativity requires freedom. Beauty requires freedom. The soul of the person must be free to do those things. And under those systems, we'll just never see that. So, to continue on, and back to how we started. Him with this poignant, statement to her looking at him and saying, "Where are you? You're very far away from here." And he said, "I'm afraid I'm in a world that's disappearing." So, I promised that I would end this video on hope, which is what I intend to do, because boy, oh boy, these are heavy topics. Basically, how this, I feel, applies today, wise words that we can learn from these stories today, is I think many of us are finding ourselves in situations where we feel alone in our grief and in our thoughts about how things change in the world. Sometimes we feel like we're surrounded by people who are naive, like Branson or Isabel, or, in the worst case, maybe we have people in our circle who are opportunist. They don't care what happens. They don't care what changes happen in the world, because they're confident they can work it to their advantage. They're confident they'll prevail. They're confident they'll continue to make all the money they want to make. And as long as that all works out, they're good. They don't care who suffers. They don't, they're pretty much in their own interests, like Max Dertweiler is in The Sound of Music. So what I wanted to talk about here is grief and aloneness, and knowing things and seeing things change, and what we can do about that, and how we can support one another in that. And what I want to just offer is it's important when people are sad to acknowledge and let them express what they're feeling. It is not loving or kind to say to somebody, "Oh, everything's going to be okay, you're worrying about nothing." That is neither loving nor kind. That is a very self-serving statement, which is, I don't really have the time to think about what you're worried about, to hear what you're worried about. I'm confident that what I believe going forward will be fine, and you need to stop complaining. So I guess what I would just offer is, as we go through, whether it's this season of change in the world, obviously in situations we need to express ourselves. We always need to stand up for what's right. That's not what I'm talking about here. And sometimes we have to leave. Not obviously in the extreme case of Von Trapp leaving his country and leaving his continent, but sometimes we have to leave conversations behind, because we just know that we are not seeing things the same way. So I guess I would just encourage you to hear one another during this time, if people are sad or grieving about changes, as we embrace this so-called new normal, if people think that's what it is. It's important that we not minimize what people will lose through this, because people will lose a great deal. Yes, there's great opportunities for some, and some people have greatly financially benefited from what's gone on in the last year. Some have made money hand over fist, while others have lost their businesses. And so we need to consider all points of view, respond to people with compassion. But remember, in the case of Von Trapp in particular, it's a hopeful story. Yes, he was never able to get back what he left, but the last 5 years of his life were a good life. He had his wife and his children. He came to a world where at the time, he had no fears of evil overtaking. I mean, this is when America was still a shining city on a hill. And so for him, there was happiness. For him, there was joy. For him, there was peace. So I think I would just offer that to you today, that there is joy, there is hope, there is peace. For those of us who follow Christ, we are constantly given peace supernaturally by our faith, and hope is something we carry in our hearts and we know to be true. But even for those who are not spiritual, grieve the changes. That's appropriate and that's healthy. But be hopeful for tomorrow, because no, it won't be the same, and some things will never be the same. But you will find a way to find pleasure and joy and good things in the future, because there are so many things we don't know about what is yet to come. And there are so many ways in which good is hard at work in the world, and that light and that truth is still warring against that which would be dark and that which would be evil. So we just continue to fight the good fight. We press on, and we pray that goodness will prevail. And on that note, I say goodbye to one of my favorite actors, Christopher Plummer. And I say, I want to just acknowledge some of the changes we're going through and acknowledge the loneliness people find themselves in. And I just pray for each and every one of you that you have a good week and that you have another good reflection as we head towards the Easter season, and hopefully a springtime and a lifting of restrictions and a lifting of all the things that keep us from those we love, that we might again enjoy what's really important in life. So, on that note, I wish you the best. Have a very good week, and we'll see you again.